Hi, friends. Tessa Timberlake here with Soulful Conversations, exploring our inner light. In this episode, The Architecture of Learning, Rachel Scott talks about making yoga education cohesive and impactful. I sit down with Rachel. She is a masterful yoga educator, curriculum designer, and author who brings depth and structure to the world of yoga education. With a degree in curriculum design and years of experience of helping yoga teachers refine their knowledge, Rachel has a gift for transforming complex ideas into well organized, accessible learning. Friends, if you've ever struggled to translate what you know into something structured and impactful, this conversation will illuminate a path forward. Tune in as we uncover the architecture of learning with Rachel Scott. Enjoy. Hi, friends. Tessa Timberlake here with Soulful Conversations. Today's guest is Rachel Scott, a seasoned expert in the yoga industry with over 20 years of experience. She's an anatomy teacher, a curriculum creator, and the author of 5 books, including resources that have shaped yoga teacher training programs worldwide. Known for her work with Do Yoga With Me, Rachel is passionate about making yoga accessible and empowering others through education and practice. Oh my gosh, friends. Okay, so I have a little story really quick. I always tell you how I know the person that I'm about to interview. Uh, it was COVID. What I was doing was no more, right? Teaching yoga. I couldn't do it, right? And so we had just moved. So I started working for Amazon for a minute. And I had a 35-minute drive back and forth. I am a podcast girl. And of course, I don't watch videos, but I listen to podcasts. That's how I found Rachel. And so Rachel was teaching anatomy. She had this great big skeleton. I think she named it. I want to say Jimmy, but that's probably wrong. But anyway, she's hilarious and she's very authentic. And she's just very real. If you've listened to me for a minute, that I love authenticity, right? So without further ado and listening to me, here is Rachel Scott. Rachel, welcome to Soulful Conversations and thank you for being here. Please tell us what you do and why you do it.
Oh, Tessa, first of all, I just want to say that was like the best intro ever. I feel like I need to have Tessa send me that bio and use that for all future things I do. That's awesome.
You're
So
welcome.
I'm Rachel. Yeah. And I'm a yoga teacher and a yoga teacher trainer. And then getting meta about it, I'm also an instructional designer. And so I help other studios and teachers to facilitate and create awesome trainings, basically. So I'm a kind of a structure thinker. So I call it, catching lightning in a bottle. I help people, take their beautiful magic and connection and all of the amazing things that they do, and then put that into a form that is going to be a transformational experience for students. So, I mean, I love education because for me, part of the purpose of being on the planet is whether we call it transformation or evolution or growth or personal development or self-actualization, but this idea of widening our own capacity for experience and meeting ourselves at our own potential, not because we need to be perfect, but just because that's a beautiful human endeavor is what I love doing. And so working in yoga education particularly is so rewarding because it's not just about learning stuff or learning academics, but it's about how do we, you know, evolve our souls, become more connected, and deepen our capacity for aliveness. Anyway, so that's why I get excited about doing what I do.
I told you, friends, she's amazing. And I wrote that bio about 4 different times. I have many pieces of paper over here scribbled because I like to be concise, although my speech is very concise. But it was very hard. It was very difficult because I know her. She's been my teacher a few times. And like many of my other teachers, she has answered the phone and tried to put my thoughts in order for me. And she's just so amazing. You cannot put her in a 1 or 2 sentence. Like for me, it should have been like 8 sentences because just studying her, it was like 2 pages worth of information, all of the yoga teacher trainings that she's taken, which really inspired me, because when you become a yoga teacher and you just want to teach yoga, it's very overwhelming because you're trying to cue and you're trying to do all the things right. And then you want to further, the information. And then you keep going with the education and you think, oh, I'm done. I can do this. What you find is that you'll never be done. Right.
Never.
And Rachel is the example, really beautiful. In fact, the most largest information that she has underneath her belt to date that I have interviewed so far. It's just amazing, all the things that she's done. So it's beautiful to see, because I'm like, oh, me too. Because if I had so much money, that's all I would be doing. I wouldn't care where I lived. I would care how much I know. Right. And so we're going to keep going. I often just like to ramble. Right. And so why yoga? What drew you to yoga initially? And what made you commit to it as a lifelong practice profession?
Yes. Yeah, no, so I started practicing yoga back in 1998 in New York City. I was an actor, and one of my boyfriends, well, my boyfriend at the time, not one of many boyfriends at the time, just he was the one boyfriend at the time. He said, I just did this yoga class. You'd love it. Come and check it out. So I went to a yoga class, and I think I loved it because it was such an embodied experience. And even though I was an actor, which is all about embodiment and emotions and feeling, I'm also a very heady person, get stuck in my head a lot. And so to have this space, which welcomed me to breathe, move, and feel and be in a non-performative way, although we could go on a tangent and talk about how yoga sometimes gets performative, but the invitation was really there to be just connected. I just loved it. And then as I learned more about yoga, I loved the philosophy. So that's what kind of pulled me in. You have these impulses to learn. And there was this kind of fire of like, oh my gosh, I want to learn this. My friend did her teacher training and I was super jealous of her. And I was, rather than be mad about it, I was smart enough to go like, oh, maybe this means I really want to do this. And so that's what started me on the yoga education journey and teacher training. And it just got better and better. Like you say, Tessa, it's like, it's vast. There are it's like so many different corridors of the yoga tradition to run down, and it never ends. And the more I studied, the more it felt in alignment to what felt true to me. Like, so yoga philosophy, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so wise. So the asana is amazing, but that's actually fairly recent development in yoga history. But the philosophy and the vast tradition, which I have so much respect and admiration for, it just felt like, wow, I'd be so humble as to dip my toes in this and try to learn more. But it really yoga became more part of the kind of central, I don't know, the core of my life, because I went through a horrible time, as many of us do. I went through this really tough period where I got married, I moved to Canada, so I left my job, left my nation, had the death of a family member, and then got divorced all in the same year. And I found myself in Canada, divorced without my friends or my family, but stubborn. So I was like, I'm not moving back to New York City. Like, but all the trappings of my life, which had been my identifiers. Oh, I'm an artist. Oh, I'm a New Yorker. That was a really big one for me. Oh, I'm a functional communicator. I certainly realized that wasn't true in the divorce. I was like, oh, I'm not so much. Whoa. So it was like the whole world kind of fell out from underneath me. And in that moment, yoga became much more of a lifeline. And of course I had bad behaviors and didn't handle it well, and, did the acting out things and, whatever, drank too much and partied too much and as an effort to get out of it. But through that, yoga became something which became like a kind of like, this is the way. This, if you want to go through this, if you want to survive this transition, here's the practice that's actually going to help you, rather than avoiding it through, acting out or going to parties or whatever it was that I was doing to cope. So yoga became the center of my life, and acting had been kind of like the mainstay of my life before that. And that world, even though it's has beautiful lessons and learnings in it, it's a very difficult play. Was an actor in New York and was just rejected constantly for years and went through all of that. And so that wasn't exactly a nurturing environment for healing, but yoga all of a sudden was. Everything in yoga led to more integration and more wholeness and more connection. And so that's when yoga became the main thing that I did with my world and did with my life.
I can so appreciate that. Uh, I thought you were a Canadian.
No, actually, I'm dual now, but I was American, moved to Canada, and got married, and that's how I became Canadian. And then I lived in Canada for 13 years, and then moved back to the States.
It's so
Ish.
funny because I've always categorized you with all the other super cool Canadian yoga teachers because there are so many, so many. There's a plethora of them in Canada
Yeah,
that I follow and I listen to on podcasts. Well, not so much anymore, but you know how it is when you get busy. When you become the difference between being a follower and then becoming like into your own, right?
creator. Yeah,
Okay. Thank you for sharing those obstacles. I think that's what makes us real, right? The evolving, from being something and going through things and then coming out of them more whole, hopefully, right?
yeah.
That's the hope. Um, so after 20 plus years of teacher training, how has your personal relationships with yoga evolved?
Oh yeah. Well, first, I think the gateway drug to yoga in North America right now is asana, right? So you do it for the asana, and there's a certain, when I started, it would have been whatever 20 plus 25 years ago of practice. And so at that time, when I was in my 20s, asana was like, oh, what can I do? And oh, let me do these fancy poses. And there was something, uh, you know, really gratifying about the physical work of it. And over time, that's become far less compelling to me. And that sort of transitioned into, I'd say, two different things compel me about the yoga tradition now. One is um, asana as a way to be functional in my life. So rather than it being asana, because like, oh wow, it's so cool, I could do this hand balance or this arm balance. I'm so not interested in that anymore. I'm much more interested in the fact that after a yoga class, I feel like I walk more upright. Like,
Yes.
that I can breathe better and that I feel the earth underneath my feet. Like those are the things that compel me. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. So I'm interested in how yoga helps me to be in my life better and freak out less and be less anxious and be more grounded and counteract. I mean, as I said, I'm a curriculum designer. So even though yoga is my whole world, it's not like I'm practicing and teaching all the time. I'm at a computer a lot. So yoga helps to antidote all of those physical tendencies. And then the second thing that really compels me about yoga is the tradition and the philosophy. Like truly, that's what to me is really important. I always theme my classes, almost always theme my classes, so that the asana is a pathway to uh, introspection and connection rather than it's not just for the sake of doing some physical practice. I'm not particularly interested in, again, performative asana, but I'm really interested in how like we can bring philosophy into what we're doing in the practice too. So I love the yoga tradition. Again, it's vast, it's a huge ocean. I'm just like standing on the shores of it and like filling my buckets as best I can, but it's huge. So but beautiful. So that's what keeps me in it. And that's what's evolved is my interest has become more philosophical, I'd say.
As a student of hers twice, she is so humbled because let me tell you, I wish I could cue like her. And maybe, with a few more years of taking more classes of hers, I will be better. But she is
Oh, thanks, Tessa.
amazing at looking at people and being able to help them cue. And she knows the body really well too, inside, right? So she's so humbled with her words, but she is not standing on the shores. She is in the middle of the ocean. She is definitely there. Um, okay, so teacher trainings,
Yeah.
and I'm just going to ask this question authentically. So the question is, what do you consider as a good yoga teacher? However, I don't think measuring, and I know you're going to say the same. We don't measure, right? And because we're authentic and we all of us bring our ownness, right, into the teaching part, which is the best part, right? That's what we should be doing. However, there are some concrete guidelines, right? And so just kind of in a roundabout, and for us yogis out there that are yoga teacher trainers and that are listening to this podcast, what are some attributes that we can, that we can kind of come into? What are some goals that we want to shoot for
Yeah.
as a
So
yoga teacher?
in terms of skills, I mean, and I do, we say we don't quantify it, but we do. I do. In my teacher trainings, we absolutely quantify skill building as a place to start. And you're so right that after you have the skills, it's like playing jazz. Like you have to learn to play your scales, and there's a way we can measure how well you're playing your scales. And then you go and you play jazz, and all of that underlies it. And then I don't measure your jazz capacity; we just feel it and experience it. So I think eventually that's what we want to get. We want to play jazz eventually, but I can speak to the scales that we need or that I think are helpful. So cueing and the ability to speak directly with clarity and accurately. I mean, there are certain skills that we can have as teachers in terms of our language that are going to be helpful. And then again, it's like when you play your scales, those get a little fuzzier and rounded, but it's based on this foundation of clarity and accuracy. Things like speaking to the origin of movement. I say, from deep inside the hip joint, turn your whole thigh out for Virabhadrasana 2, rather than turn your foot. So there's ways we can point in those directions. I can say, lift your arms up rather than your arms are reaching up, which is passive, right? So those are very kind of pragmatic skills that we can develop in a 200-hour, and then keep cleaning up, watching our crutch language, that we all use. Oh, beautiful, great, wonderful, you guys, like all of that kind of fluff. And it's not that any of that stuff is bad, but we want to be able to teach with intentionality. So, and I think this is one of the most important things that I want for my students to cultivate, is that they become intentional with their teaching. It's like, why are you cueing it this way? Why are you choosing that word? Why did you choose to teach to those actions as opposed to these actions? In your sequencing, why did you choose this series of poses, and how are you teaching them to create the class experience you want? And this is when the teacher's voice and their mission and their authenticity comes out, is in their creative choice of, my gosh, I want to create this experience for my students. How will I use all of these amazing tools that I have in order to create that for them? So I think that's how we can kind of bridge skill with authenticity. And sequencing and understanding the body. Those are some core skills that I think would be really important for us all to, hone or to look to. And here's the thing. It's like every 200 hour is different. Every 300 hour is different. And so to know what, for those out there who are already teachers, is to look at your 200 hour and say like, okay, my 200 hour was awesome at this, because everything's going to focus a little bit differently, even though we have standards and stuff. It's going to be a little different. Like, did your training really focus on the subtle body and the energetics and pranayama and meditation? Amazing. You might need to flesh that out with pragmatic skill building in your cueing and anatomy, right? Or you might be like, hey, my training was amazing with anatomy. It was super specific, but I'm missing some of the philosophical juice. I need a little bit more of that. Or chanting or mantra, I need these other things. So it's for us to be really proactive and not go, it stops at a 200 hour, because 200 hours is, you guys, is nothing, right? We know it's nothing, but to be really clear about like, what are the skills I got and where do I feel like I need to grow next? And then we can have more agency in our own progression, right? And how we learn and what's next for us. Cause it's, again, right? It's the ocean. It never ends. So
It is definitely the ocean when it comes to yoga.
yeah.
You become a yoga teacher with your 200 hour, and you start teaching, and you really begin to understand of how little you know. And then you go back and you get your 3 or your 5 and are like, okay, I can do this. And then somewhere in the middle, you're like, I still don't know enough. Nope, still don't know enough, right? And so you start measuring. And so somewhere in the middle of it, you start really honing in and finding where you're going to lean to. Like, what's your favorite? Like, I have learned yin is my favorite, but I really need hatha and vinyasa because I will just do yin. So, next question, we're just going to
Yeah.
keep on moving. Instructional design. I had no
Mm.
idea about this of you, and I find it really interesting, and I want to talk a lot about it. So the
Great.
question is, tell the listeners what it is all about, because I truly feel it's one of your special assets. So
Mm.
give it to us.
Yeah. So instructional design is basically the art and the craft of creating good education. So when I was I don't know, this was some like 2008, somewhere 2009, somewhere in there. I can't remember quite exactly when, but I started looking around and I took an online course with a teacher whom I love. I still love to this day. He's amazing. But I took an online course with him and I was like, wow, this is really hard to engage with. I'm sort of missing his magic. Like I can't really get it. And so I started to realize that there was, and also I was building teacher trainings for Y Yoga in Vancouver, and I built a 200 hour, and it was the first 200 hour I built. And I was like, there's got to be a way to make this more efficient. And so I thought, well, I really want to learn how to create courses in an efficient way, in an effective way, where I'm not revising them. And I also really feel like online education is going to be super important in the future. And I want to know how to do that well. So at that point, that inspired me to go back and earn my master's in something called instructional systems and learning technology. I thought I was just going to learn like how to do the tech of like instructional design, but actually it wasn't. It was like a whole master's program in the theory of it. And I wasn't even going to get my master's. I was going to just try to get an online, certificate. But it turned out that because of the school I was taking it with, it was the same price to do your 3 years master's as it was to do like a certificate. And I thought, and I'm a nerd, so of course I'm like, well, let me do the whole thing. So that's what I learned is instructional design, and it's basically like you look at um, a student and you say, I want to be able to get my student from A to B, and how do I do that? And it's pretty common sense once you figure it out. You're reverse engineering the educational experience that's going to get you from here to there. So yeah, so I did that and I love that. And it turns out that the way my brain works, I think, lends itself to that particular process too. I'm kind of I think in terms of structure, and so I thought I have an ability here to help these organic, kind of more, let's say, right brained yogis who are a little bit more in their feeling state. I can maybe be a bridge for them to help them figure out how to transmit this beautiful, magical experience that they have into something that is repeatable, consistent, and can also work online, which requires a lot more structure. You can't just go into a room and sprinkle fairy dust on everyone, which is amazing. But so how do we actually box that up in a way that is effective? So that's what I thought. Hey, I can help folks with this. So that's what instructional design basically is.
That is exactly why I keep going back to Rachel. Right brain. Because I am a feely, touchy kind of girl, and I have to do it in order to teach it. I can't just look, or I can't just look. I have to do the practice, so therefore I can teach it. Yeah, that makes perfect sense of why I keep coming back to Rachel Scott. So I love it. Uh, Quality matters.
Oh yeah.
How does that influence the way that you design your curriculum?
Yeah, that was really cool. So when I first got my degree, I worked for a company which assisted um, universities to transition their faculty from in person to online. So I worked at the university level to help do that, and that was like building courses for faculty. And as part of that, the company that I worked with, which was amazing, um, basically paid for me to go and earn these two certificates. It's quality matters. And there's what they trained me to do was to evaluate a course top to bottom for its efficacy as an online course. And that would involve things like, is it accessible? Right. So, do I have alternate text for all of the photos? Are things captioned? Is it structured in a way that's easy for the student to understand? Do I have a clear start here place? How long are the videos? Are the videos, like, are things organized in a way that make them easy for the learner to follow? Are the multiple choice questions worded in a way that is useful. I mean, everything top to bottom. So I took 2 courses with them. I forget what they're called. It was like peer reviews. Anyways, so, but it was really instructive to learn how to structure online courses and basically just take a keen eye for that. Now, in the yoga world and kind of in the kind of out here in the vocational world, when we're not in the university, we don't have to do all the things that you might have to do at the university level, where you need to be a little bit more attentive to certain aspects of what you're creating. And that said, I pulled a lot of those things into how I design courses, how I structure courses, and how I coach other people to create their courses so that we can try to do best practices. So that's what Quality Matters was. It's like a couple of certificate courses that I took, which really focused on the online environment and making really good education. So I'm really grateful to that company I worked for. Those were really awesome. And I highly recommend them for any instructional designers who happen to be listening. They were really useful and practical.
That's amazing. There's such a depth to your education. You know, I mean, that's wow.
Once a nerd,
Right?
once a nerd, always a nerd. Yeah.
Author of 5 books.
Yeah.
How has writing them shaped your journey through yoga?
Ooh. Yeah. It was so funny, Tessa, because the first book that I worked on, and this one is out of all the 5, this one is kind of the most my heart on a plate kind of book. And that's Head Over Heels, A Yogi's Guide to Dating, which sounds a little bit more flip than it actually is. And that one, what happened is that I was teaching and I love theming and, I like to bring the personal into the room. And so I was 40 and I was looking around at my life and going, why don't I have children? Where is my husband? What happened? How did I forget to do that? And I'd been through these relationships. And anyways, so I started theming in class about how I had joined all these dating sites. It was my final hurrah. I'm like, I got to try to get the husband and the kid that I thought I was always going to have. So I went on all these dating sites and learned so much about applying my yoga practice to interpersonal relationships, which ultimately I think is kind of what we all are called to do. And so I started talking about it in class, and I write, and I've always been a processor by writing, right? I've always had journals. I love writing. I was an English major in college. So I started blogging and I started talking about it in class, and people get it. Because when you come into class, you go, oh my gosh, I went on a first date last night. And at the end of the date, I knew it wasn't a match. And I was so hard, but I had to step up and tell this person the kindest way possible that it wasn't. Wow, it's so hard for us to be truthful when we think we're going to disappoint people. How does this relate to a life in yoga? Blah, 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 blah. People relate to that. They get that. We've all been there, especially with these relationships, because this is the world we live in. And so, I started realizing that in all these blog posts I was doing, that there was a blog there. So that book is the most deeply personal to me. And what's funny is that I had always wanted to write and have books. And while I was writing that book, I got the call from a publisher in Maine who actually saw me on Do Yoga with me as a teacher. And they read some of my blogs and were like, oh, she can write. And they were writing a yoga book. And they were like, hey, would you want to be our writer for this? And they're great. They were Cider Mill Press, and they're just an awesome group of people. And I was like, oh my gosh, sure. It was like what I'd always wanted to do was write. And so then out of Cider Mill Press, there came a couple other books I did for them, which one of them is called Living Your Yoga is what the title wound up being. And that has more of the philosophy. That's kind of like the second closest to my heart in terms of the books. But they're really useful. Like they've got a lot of good, simple cueing and sequencing in them. And then I got asked by another publisher to write a book. So I wrote books for publishers. And then, but the book that I self-published eventually was the Head Over Heels, Yogi's Guide to Dating. And this have taught me a couple things. Head Over Heels, the Yogi's Guide to Dating was definitely moving through the fire of my life, writing in order to understand and better frame my experiences, very cathartic, help putting meaning to challenging experiences. And how do we find the light in the conflict and the challenges and those obstacles that we encounter? So that really has informed how I ideally, hopefully, in my better moments, approach my life generally. And the other books were really useful in terms of just feeling like I had information out there about, sequencing and teaching poses and philosophy. And what's most interesting is that I recently got approached by a publisher again to write a book. And Tessa, it was the most empowering thing. I was like, I can say no now. I don't need to write this book. I might want to write another book at some point, but it wasn't this book. And so that desire I also had to like get books out there, I'm like, I'm good. I kind of did it and I feel good about it. And so it's, yeah, I've kind of come to the end of that journey. Not to say I won't write again, but I fulfilled that desire. I was like, I really want to have some writing out there, and yay. And now I do. So
It is very empowering when you can say no and you feel good about it. Like
yeah, it's
your
hard to
guest
say
says no and
no.
you're just like, yes,
Isn't
yes,
it? It's so hard, especially
yes,
I find, especially maybe for everybody, but I don't know, as a yoga person too, and for teachers out there, they'll know it's like you get offered a job and it's really hard to say no sometimes, even when it's not the right thing. So
yes. I
yeah,
agree.
saying no.
I agree. I just stopped teaching classes.
Oh, congratulations.
I know. I mean, my body has missed it this week. I
Yeah.
just returned from Texas from seeing the grandson, and so yeah, I came back this week, and I'm like, okay, I have to do yoga intentionally. I get to do yoga for myself
Oh,
more
yeah.
often, right? Not to do yoga because I need yoga, but to do yoga just for the sake of doing yoga, right?
Yeah.
Which is freedom. It's so freeing. Yes. So, okay. So here's some mushy questions.
Great.
Divinely guided. Any moments in the last 20 plus years where you have felt like God, universe, matrix has guided you and you knew it, like you felt it. You're like, oh, this is cool.
Mm. I had a moment where I was at my parents' in Arizona, and I was struggling with arts or yoga, right? I was really struggling with the kind of the two paths available to me. And I remember just sort of looking up at the sky and being like, what do I do? And the answer was just yoga. And I was like, okay. And not that I haven't doubted since then. I'm like, was that real? But I followed that. And I can remember back when I kind of feel like, oh my gosh, or, I'm always like, I can be a total FOMO person. I don't know about you, but I can be like, what if, or, there's all these lives that we could have led. And I've definitely had FOMO about the arts at different times because it used to be such a huge part of my world. And yet I do remember that moment. And I'm like, there was something in me that just spoke without hesitation and said this. Another place that I feel divinely guided, and this is in a small way, something I make my 300-hour students do, which comes from the amazing work of Julia Cameron from The Artist's Way, is to write morning pages. And when and I'll kind of go in and out of this habit, but I find that it's like just write 3 longhand pages and blah, 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 and a stream of consciousness. And I have absolutely found the voice of God coming through those pages occasionally. Or I have been writing and I'll ask a question and I get an answer and I'm like, oh my gosh, hallelujah, where did that answer come from? Like whether we say God is within you and you feel this deep reservoir of wisdom and intuition, or you're like, the universe is informing me and I'm led by so much more than what I can palpably perceive with my 5 senses. There is a wisdom that we can absolutely tap into. And I found it in those moments, again, small everyday ways. I would also say, I'll give you one more,
Yay.
and this has to do with Gil. So I've always been, I know Gil Headley is my partner in all things. So I've always been, I've had the fortune to be involved for the most part, not always, but for the most part, with some really beautiful humans, like as a partner romantically. And yet I have never felt settled. I've never felt grounded. It's always been kind of a mismatch, like square peg, round hole, even though these are some remarkable, beautiful humans who I'm still in touch with because they're amazing humans. And yet I have not felt settled in that. And my relationship with Gil sort of started in the most magical way where we kind of connected and stepped towards each other. And there was just always a feeling of this is right. And again, Tessa, I get stuck in my brain. Like, this is why I have to do yoga and practice, is because otherwise I'd be a head case and never listen to my body. I practice what I need to practice. I teach what I need to learn. But with Gil, there was always a feeling of yes, or there, it was like the hesitation or the resistance was gone. And in a very short time, we came together in our lives in a way that has been super satisfying, and I think and very elevating to both of us. And I still have this feeling of like, yes, it doesn't mean things are easy. We just did a tour around the United States, which had some particular challenges to it, but I've always had the feeling of yes. And it's like, this is not a mental thing. This is some sort of, and then not even a body thing. It's more like a spiritual thing, a soul thing that just says, yes, this is, you're in the right place. And I've only know that because I felt myself so not in the right place at different times in my life. So I think we can trust that feeling of, it's, I don't know, it's like the alignment clicks and you're like, it's not easy, but it's the path. It's the right, I'm on the right path. So
I was going to ask you how doing life with Gil was. That's 3 times that you've answered my question without me answering it.
Oh.
So, but I will ask you in a minute how it is, in his world of what he does, and what I say his world, but it's your world too. So I feel like it's y'all's world. So, what message do you want your students to receive the loudest and deepest?
Like my students who practice with me?
Either.
Or okay. So I'll answer both because I think both are compelling and slightly different. I think for the practice, it's always like get in your body, get in your body, get in your body, get in your body. From your body and from the anchoredness of your body, it's like we can be present, we can get out of our stories, we can make real choices, we can be more connected to reality, we can not believe everything we think, but we can actually, expand to the possibilities of the present moment. So, and all that starts by just being in your body. And that practice, whether we're doing asana or whether we're doing pranayama or whether we're sitting and meditating and actually allowing ourselves to feel our experience, there's so much goodness there. And that's like the doorway to so many good things. So for my students, that's it. And that's what I'm working on. I'm working on like, get out of your freaking hamster brain. I have such a hamster brain, everybody. Do not be deceived. I have a massive hamster brain, and get down. For my students, it's be intentional. Be intentional. Again, it's those jazz scales. It's like, what are you trying? Why are you doing? Why are you teaching the way you're teaching? Why are you using the props you're using? Why are you doing the sequence you're doing? It's a massive creative process to be intentional about your creation, and to serve and to be of service through your creation. So that would be the biggest message for my teacher trainees. And also that they're each individual and beautiful and amazing and will teach differently than everyone else. Sometimes we get scared that, there's too many yoga teachers or there's so much competition. It's like, no, you be you, because this gift here is going to be different than anyone else's gift.
Oh my gosh. I just had a revelation.
What was it? What was your revelation?
Squirrel. So like you, I had a moment in Texas where I've done a lot of things. I did hair for 16 years. I was a dental assistant. I'm a photographer. But I was saturated in an area of Texas, heavily populated, where every mom in the world was doing photography. And I hate editing. I hate it. I would rather, I don't know, I'd rather do anything than sit down and edit because I can't sit down, right? And I was talking to my best friend, Nicole Radke, and I said, I don't know which one to do, yoga or photography. And she said, you never shut up about yoga. You hate editing and photography. So I think it's yoga, right? And so what you just said about yoga and authenticity, and it doesn't matter because your voice is going to come out of it. That's exactly why I gave up photography, because there were too many mommy and me photographers that were doing like all the, cuddle, super cute babies in a basket and all that. And I couldn't get in the lens what I saw in the end product. And it was really frustrating with me, but I hated editing and I hate the falseness of it. I wanted to be a candid photographer and people didn't want that, right? I'm not a foo-foo kind of girl. And so as soon as you said that, I was like, somebody wants canned shots.
Yeah,
So somebody does, you know? So
absolutely.
somebody always wants something. You just have to be brave enough to do what your heart and your soul says to do, right? So, yeah, thank you.
That's
Okay.
awesome.
So, what is it like to work with your super amazing partner who I treasure? And the other part of the story about Rachel is that I always know the yoga teachers before I know their partners or their friends or anything else, right? Or their books or, I had heard of Gil before Rachel, which was crazy to me because but I was in love. I was obsessed with fascia. So that's why, right?
Oh
With
yeah.
his What the Fuzz. And he's equally to Rachel. He's funny. He's authentic. He's no BSer. Oh, he's yummy, right? And then so when I was driving back and forth and I heard Rachel, I was like, oh my gosh. And then years later, they're together. Like they do things together. And I'm like, that makes total sense to me, right? And it's two it's a double whammy, it's a 2 for 1 because you get two very unique, confident, inside of themselves people that are very authentic and they love what they do so much that they're really good at it, and it's because they love it, and then they unite. And it's like, the cartoon with the rings and the what's it, brother and the sister with the rings, and they unite. I forget what the name of it is, but
Oh yeah, yeah, the
yeah,
Wonder
yeah,
Twin
yeah.
powers.
Yes, yes, yes.
Activate.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Except for
Yeah.
you're not brother and sister. So that would be creepy.
That'd be so creepy.
So how was it like to work with Gil?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Gil is a mad professor. He's like the crazy Einstein super thinker. We kind of joke on the nerve tour that Gil is the right brain and I'm the left brain. Like he's like he gets cosmic, which is sort of funny because he's quote unquote this like the more sciency whatever. But no, he's a poet and he's a creative, and I kind of am I can kind of take all of that and again kind of like organize it into something. So I mean, Gil is, it's funny. People are like, you guys must have the craziest conversations. And I was like, yeah, we do. But 80% of the conversations are about like, oh, the RV needs an oil change. And, oh, we have deer in the yard, better get the septic pumped. It's all very banal. But I think working together, one of the things that I have learned from working with Gil is kind of the human story of how different we all are. Gil and I see the world in very different ways. Just because we're different humans, we have different filters, different experiences. I remember we were walking down the road once and I was like, what do you see? And he told me. And it was like, oh, I see the turrets of the Victorian blah and how it's fractal or blah, And I was like, wow, we see the world so differently. I'm seeing the world like this. And we have such an appreciation for how different we are. I'm a hummingbird, Gil will tell you. Like I'm a hamster. I run like 1,000 miles an hour. I race all over the place. I can be too fast. Whereas Gil is more like kind of this, slow poet in the moment. He's more like the tortoise where he'll stay with a concept and research it and go deep for a really long time. And he kind of adds onto his knowledge that way. And so we operate at very different frequencies. And because we don't expect the other person to work the same way we do, we can appreciate, for the most part, we can appreciate the differences and enjoy them and find the value of each way of working without trying to make the other person just like us. We're different. And I think we got together older, right? Like I'm 50 now and Gil's 61. And so when you are older, I think you also, if you've been paying attention, you don't expect everyone to be like you. And so we're at an age maybe where now there's more appreciation and gratitude for the differences, and an ability to see all the value of that. So yeah, so I think that's what it's like being together. I mean, we were together in 5 square feet of space in an RV over the last 15 months or 16 months. And that was informative because we survived it. fine. Like we're both kind of like can be low key enough, and kind of acquiescent enough to create space for each other, and to actually be able to manage that and stay together and weather it well. So yeah, it's fun. Gil's an adventure. He's very different than I am, and all that's sometimes I might be like, oh my gosh, you're so different, but I also, for the most part, I just totally enjoy that and relish it. So
The podcast that I was able to do with him while I was in Texas was so fun because, again, you know, digging into both of you. Rachel, I've talked to you about creating yoga teacher trainings with through the lens of God, right? So, and I had no idea that he was a religious major. So it was a very impactful depth over my head kind of conversation, and you barely heard me say anything except for what I was asking because it was over my head. Right. But it was beautiful and it was rich and it was amazing. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. So, and listeners, I was able to go to the DC Nerve Tour, and I spent the weekend with my daughter who was in Harrisonburg. It was only an hour from DC, which was amazing. And I drove up one day, and it was a beautiful. In fact, Gil told us that Congress is a Congress that meets there at the Catholic University.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Anyway, some sort of government has something that they hold there. And if you really want to know, go listen to Gil's podcast. He'll tell you. Yeah, it was a beautiful time. It was amazing. I was there to hug Rachel in person because we've always done everything online. So that was really nice. She was super busy because everyone wants to buy the books, and Gil writes poetry. So and I didn't know that until I got there. Yeah, it was a beautiful experience. And again, I've got like a notebook full of like, I don't know, 10 pages of information that was trying to spell words correctly or make pictures with my pen of all the anatomy that he was teaching us. It was so beautiful. And Rachel was in the tech world and making sure that everything worked well and organizing everything like she said that she does, because that's what she does really well. So it was a beautiful day. It was amazing. And yeah, so it was a get to for me. I was like, yay, I get to do this. So okay, so 3 books that you recommend for our listeners.
So one of my go-to books is When Things Fall Apart by Pema Chodron. So, all the hard parts of my life, like I talked about during the divorce and everything like that, like Pema Chodron is, I just love her. I think everyone should have it on their shelf. And it can be a go-to book. You just open it up when you need a little reassurance that actually those things that break us apart are the things that ultimately help us to find a deeper integration than the superficial integration we usually have. We anchor ourselves so much to things that are temporary, our personality, our jobs, relationships, locations, things like that. And when all of that goes to hell, Pema's there to tell you, no, this is good news. It's okay. This is actually the best thing for you in your spiritual journey. So yeah, I think that's a great book to have. Another book that I love, and this is more of for yoga philosophy, is Tantra Illuminated. Now you have to be kind of a yoga nerd to love this book, but Tantra Illuminated by Christopher Harish Wallace. It's one of the best books on Tantra that I've encountered, and I just gobbled it up. So it's an amazing resource. Highly recommend his work and anything he does. He also has a website called Tantra Illuminated, which is amazing. Let's see, a third book. Gosh, there's just like, I'm glancing over at my like bookshelf to see if there's anyone that wants to be spoken about.
You don't have to give us 3.
I don't have to give you. You know what I'm going to do though? I will say a teacher, because I feel like nowadays books are kind of like, I don't know. Oh, you know who I'm going to recommend? Okay, and this is a teacher, and it's not quite a book, but I think it should be. I mean, it might as well be a book. Is Adia Shanti's what is it called? The 30-day wake up challenge. So I love Adia Shanti, and again, this is like a spiritual teacher. He's a I think it's more like Tibetan Buddhism, which is very similar to tantric yoga. So he's an amazing teacher, so accessible. I love listening to his voice. And it's a 30-day series of practices that you do. It's like 6 minutes in the morning of just listening to Adia talk to you about stuff. And it's a beautiful way to get more connected to, again, just like we're talking about being in the moment, to be connected to this moment and to feel the world around you in a more intimate way. So I'll recommend that in lieu of a quote unquote book.
That's amazing. Thank you. I love that. Yeah. And yes, I mean, and it's so Rachel. Okay. If you had a superpower, what would it be?
Time travel.
Mm,
I want to go to all the places.
yes, me too.
Time travel with vaccines, or so, you know what I mean? Like, or time travel with health immunity from the things that might be back there. But, yeah, I think it would be so amazing to go and like watch Shakespeare or go to the Roman Senate, or sneak in, or go listen to, Jesus, or, go listen to sages to speak the tale of the Mahabharata. Like, well, I mean, that'd be amazing. Be able to go
Greece.
see these places. Yeah, right?
Rome.
Rome. Come on, we could
Jerusalem.
live gladiator. Be amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be mine too, because I love history. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Ah, we're early.
We
this
knocked
is
it out,
not
Tessa.
usual my case. How do we find you, Rachel Scott?
Oh, yeah.
How does the world
Sure.
find you?
Yeah, you can find me on my website is Rachel, Rachel, yoga.com. And that's kind of a portal to everything. From there, if you look through my site, you'll see, there's lots of stuff for educators, but you can also find a link to my online classes. Come and practice with me. I'm on Instagram and YouTube as Rachel Scott Yoga. And my YouTube channel has tons of resources I primarily orient myself to newer yoga teachers. So if you're like, oh, cueing, I'd like to brush that up, or anatomy, I got tons of stuff on there, which might be of interest. And I'm always like, it's always fun to connect with people on social media if they do that sort of thing. But yeah, that's how you reach me. And I always do on my website and in my Instagrams stuff, you can find a link to have a chat with me. So if you're, got burning questions or you just want to connect, I've had people connect for lots of different reasons. You can just book a chat with me online. And I'm, always happy to meet yogis out there and talk to you.
That's exactly what I did. She has this thing that says, buy me a coffee or something, or chat with me over coffee, something like that. And that's exactly what I did. Yep. And joined her cueing and sequencing. And I've done it twice now. I'll probably do it again because I didn't finish the second one. Had a lot going on, but that's okay.
Can always come back.
That's right. That's right. And it's worth coming back. It is worth coming back. Thank you, Rachel Scott, for your time and your passion and your love. Thank you for pouring your light into this world. I mean it from the depth of my heart. I don't know that I would know as much as I know right now without your yes. So thank you for your yes. And tell Gil I said hi.
I sure will, Tessa. It's great to see you.
Thanks, Rachel. Bye.
Bye.